Hi, my name's Mercedes. Welcome to Highlands Online. Whether it's your first time joining us or you're a regular here at Highlands, welcome. It's so good to have you. We'd love to hear from you on our Instagram or Facebook or via our website if you have any prayer requests or questions, or even if you just want to say hey. We hope you enjoyed today's message.
Oh, good morning, everybody. I know, right? You're in store today. Hey, we're continuing our series on heroes, looking at pretty regular, normal kind of people in the Bible that God raised up and was able to do significant things through, which gives us all hope, doesn't it? That He can pick someone ordinary and do something pretty extraordinary through them and in their life. Last week, we looked at Gideon, the most ordinary person in the Bible, I think, and what God was able to begin doing in his life. And this morning, I want to pick another one that kind of gets hero status quite often when we're talking about him, but it was a regular man that God raised up for a specific time to get a specific message across, a man named Elijah. Now, the story we're going to talk about here is Elijah is kind of coming back to the people of God, and he's going to make them choose. He's going to make them actually make a choice. The people of God at this time are straddling kind of two different options. They're at this place where there's half serving God and half caring there, but kind of half serving other ones as well. And Elijah is making this point of indecision is still a decision. Is kind of sitting on the fence is still a position you've decided to take. And so they're stuck between, the Hebrew name for our God is Yahweh, stuck between Yahweh and Baal, or all these different Baals. It's kind of they had Baals for everything. Baals for fertility, Baals for rain, Baals for business, Baals for everything. They just summed it up as Baal for this pagan god that their neighboring kind of people worshipped, that they were kind of dabbling with. And even just talking about this, I can feel the tension in the room, because you're there going, well, making decisions, Doug, can be tricky, right? Have you ever gone out to dinner with someone who struggles making decisions? It looks really tricky. You know, like what decisions, what will I wear today is a hard one. And thankfully, you made a decision. Aren't we glad that you didn't stay with indecision today? You know, what are we going to eat? What are we going to wear? There's one kind of moment in my life that I realized that indecision is completely inappropriate and pauses all time. It was the moment I got down on one knee and said, "Will you marry me?" to my wife. Now, this is any women here that may be getting engaged soon, can I let you know, every second is roughly about 3 years worth of waiting for the man on the knee. So you can make him pay and torment a little bit. And the other one is any word that's not yes sounds like no. So my wife started with, "Are you serious?" And I just went, "That's not yes." And very quickly followed with yes, but I had an out-of-body experience, walked around thinking about how could I have done this different, what's going on, and then came back in when she said yes, and relief. How good is that? But in that moment, indecision would have also been a very strong, loud, clear decision, yeah? You with me? Same as you, if you just stayed with indecision of what will I put on this morning, that is a bold decision of going with indecision. And same with this is where the people of God, the Israelites were at the time. They were kind of not really making a solid choice here, but in doing so were making it very loud and clear. William James, a philosopher of the 19th century, put it this way: when you have to make a choice and don't make it, that is in itself a choice. And this is where not just the people of God in 1 Kings were at, I'd say this is where a lot of people are at with God themselves today, is that we've not rejected God per se, but it doesn't mean we've chosen Him fully either. We haven't pushed Him away, but we haven't grabbed Him with both hands and said we are all in this direction. I doubt that you have rejected God. You unlikely would have been here this morning if that is in your case. But being here also doesn't mean that we have gone all in. And I would say that there's been plenty of times in my life, and a lot of my friends, a lot of people that I've known and grown up with, and even a lot of the church, we haven't rejected Him, but it doesn't mean that we have gone all in with Him either. That we have a tendency of straddling in two camps and sitting on the fence a little bit, which is still a decision in itself. And so Israel get to this point from a downhill kind of, a spiral downwards for years. The king at this time that we're about to read, his name is Ahab, and at one point he was a God-honoring man. He gave his kids God-honoring Hebrew names that literally meant the Lord is God, and that I'll serve him and worship him alone. But he's chosen to marry the wicked witch of the West, named Jezebel, a pretty awful woman. In fact, there's a lot of things named after her since that we grab hold of in today's church culture. But she's not known for great things, but she is fully committed to Baal and Baal worship. And to the point where she's getting as many of the prophets of God murdered, trying to kill them all. And even Elijah believed she'd done it. She'd killed all of them. She hadn't, but she did a pretty good job. She ordered them all to be killed and was enforcing Baal worship to be the state religion at the time and doing a reasonable good job at this. Poor old cowardly Ahab, though, did nothing to prevent it, supported it, funded it, and made sure that she was successful in her endeavor. The man started straddling two camps and serving two gods. Ultimately, we see that the Israelites started following this kind of philosophy and belief in, and we can kind of dabble in a few different things that they thought, well, if Baal lets me down, I can always come back to Yahweh. And you know what? If I'm praying and Yahweh's not kind of switching on right now and I don't like his timeline, well, guess what? I've always got Baal to fall back onto. I can just go over here and dabble and do things their way. I could try things God's way, and if I don't like the way that Yahweh or the Lord is kind of asking us to live, you know what? There's a Baal that probably has an alternate view, and I could probably follow through with the way that he's telling me to live and that this God is telling me to live, and that's okay. And you can have your opinion because, well, this is God's opinion over here, what I'm calling God at the moment. And so this is what the Israelites started to live like is, well, we'll fall back on whichever kind of view of the world, view of my life, and whichever one's going to prosper me and make me feel better, that's the one I will serve in that particular moment. What a great way to live. How silly are these people back in the olden days, right? Again, let's not reflect too far onto this. Because this is how we usually think. I've thought this plenty of times reading the Bible is like those silly old primitive people. Oh, how could they make such silly decisions? How dumb are you? Oh gosh. And then you really quickly try not to listen to the Holy Spirit talk back to you. But how primitive these people with their different gods. And often we think we are so far advanced from them that we've forgotten all these things, and yet honestly, we worship the exact same things that they were worshiping. The power, prosperity, money, sex, family, popularity. These were all the things. These were their Baals. These were their gods that they worshipped and determined what they would do in their life. The difference, I think, between them and now and how silly they were compared to how advanced we are is at least back then they had recognized that these things had a spiritual dimension to them. That they would call them a Baal, they would call them God. We just call them, well, that's just something. And we've kind of dismantled and torn apart the fact that these idols in our lives and these little gods in our lives actually have an ability to grab our soul and determine and direct our life, and not just that, our eternity. At least they knew it. So maybe they're not as primitive as we think. Maybe they're a little bit ahead of us in some of these ways. They knew what they were doing had an ultimatum that lasted for eternity. They were just being reckless with it at the time. So these things for us and for them, they quickly become idols, don't they? Things that we grab hold of and something that takes ultimate worth that we are willing to sacrifice nearly anything in order to grab a hold of it. It becomes God. Our primary security, our primary fulfillment, these things become our identity. And this is what he's grabbing hold of, Elijah, and this is what the message is for us today when we read this story, is that these idols are the things that shape who we are, what we do, how we where we get value from, and what we're willing to sacrifice in order to get it. See, I read this a little while ago, that an idol is not usually a bad thing, it's usually a good thing that you've made into a God thing. Something that you are subservient to, something that you need to grab hold of for your fulfillment, something you need for your security, your identity, to complete and give you joy. For many of us, it's the example of money. It's no different to them. In fact, their god of their main Baal was the one of fertility, which was directly linked to their economy. It brought rain, it brought prosperity, it brought family, it brought all these things. And for us, our idol of money is often the place that we grab all of our security from. In fact, we are willing to sacrifice nearly anything else in order to get, well, just a little bit more. Then it would be okay. And just a little bit more. We push family aside, our time, we sacrifice our joy at some places, at whatever cost to grab a hold of it. We become worried about it all the time. It's the thing that determines how and who we become. And there's always the promise that if you just get a little bit more, it'll be okay. Just a little bit more. For other people, it's our family, the thing that grabs a hold of us in our identity. We sacrifice everything in order to see it become the way we think it should be. This is a big one for single people, is then I will be happy, then I will be complete. If it looks like this, then it will all be okay. We worry about it, and it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but it becomes a God thing, and we start serving it. Accomplishment, sex, pleasure, status, popularity, all of these things, right? We're not a whole lot different here. I like the way that one commentator wrote it. It says, we have as many Baals in our heart as Jezebel tried to put in Israel. There are so many things that we grab a hold of, and again, we're just at the place where we don't put any spiritual emphasis on this or any connection or conditioning of our soul. We just go, well, this is just life, and we continue on. Whereas the thing we need to understand that these things are able to grab hold of us. So there's that saying of going, there's nothing wrong with money as long as money doesn't have you. You can have it, just don't let it have you. There's nothing wrong with all these pleasures, just don't let them have you. There's nothing wrong with looking for accomplishments and wanting to do the best you can and see all your endeavors be successful, but that is not your identity, that is not your security, that is not who you are. Those are just things that we do. Don't allow good things to become your God things. Otherwise, we end up with just as many Baals as Jezebel was worshipping and enforcing on the people of Israel as well. And so this is where, setting up all this context, this is where we kind of get to, with Elijah is rolled back into town and demanded a kind of conversation and starts a confrontation with Ahab. This is where we pick up in 1 Kings 18, verse 17. It says, when Ahab saw him, he explained, so it really is you troublemaker of Israel. I just love that title. You're a troublemaker. But he responds, says, I have made no trouble for Israel, Elijah replied. In fact, it's you and your family that are the troublemakers. And you understand a little bit why now. For you have refused to obey the commands of the Lord and have worshipped the images of Baal instead. Now summon all of Israel to join me at Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who are supported by Jezebel. Other translations say that sit at Jezebel's table, and I just think that is a big dining table, right? They got 850 kind of seats. That is a long stretch of a table. But she's funding this whole thing. This is kingdom-funded pagan worship. Again, don't reflect too much into our own world, right? Verse 20 says, so Ahab summoned all the people of Israel and the prophets to Mount Carmel. Now, the Carmel Mountains, they're not sure which point exactly this was in, but there's a whole series of mountains for Mount Carmel between the Phoenicians, which is Jezebel's people, right, and Israel. It falls literally between the two lands. And here we find that not only are two people straddling the fence between their God systems, is that Elijah is calling them to the place that is a literal kind of manifestation of that decision that they're making. We're going up to the top of the mountain that straddles between our two lands, and you will have to pick which side of the mountain you are walking down on. We're going to go up there, and here is the contest that we're going to do. Here's the confrontation. And at this point, of course, Ahab kind of gives the big thumbs up and okays it because These points, these summits, were considered a home ground for the Phoenicians. This is a sacred place in their Baal worship, and they were like, home ground advantage, baby, let's go. Let's pick the high one. We've been there before. That's where our gods come. And the contest that Elijah pictures in a minute, you'll see, is they understand that, hey, the gods that we are worshiping are known as the Baal of fertility, the one that brings rain and lightning. We are happy with your rulings to go forward here. So in verse 21, it continues, it says, so Elijah stood in front of them and said, how much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions, straddling the Mount Carmel? How much longer will you not pick a side? If the Lord is God, we'll follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. But the people were completely silent. See, they're hobbling their faith. I like how that's worded in the NIV, it's worded limping. They're not able to put full weight. You know, when you've got a limp, something sore, you're not putting your full weight on it because you're not fully trusting how it's going. And that's what Elijah is saying to these people, going, you are limping in your faith. You are kind of saying, hey, I'm following Yahweh, but I'm not going to put my whole trust on it. I'm not going to put my whole support on it. I'm going to kind of lean into Baal a little bit, but I'm also just... I'm not game to go all the way in here. I'm hobbling around. I'm limping between two different versions here. And the people, when he called them out, they were silent, which is probably reasonable, but not appropriate. Similar to silence to the question, will you marry me? Silence is not okay. Probably reasonable if it comes out of nowhere. But it's not the appropriate answer. In fact, it is a decision in itself, similar to you choosing, well, what do I wear today? Thank you for making a choice. Because indecision is a strong decision, yeah? And their silence is speaking loud and clear in this moment. And as Elijah calls them out, I feel that for us, this is what Elijah is saying, the same thing. If God is Lord, let's serve him. But you know what? If money is Lord, if it's the one that brings fulfillment, if it's going to bring eternal salvation, if your power and your success is the thing that's going to bring miracle, if it's redeemed you and healed your soul, if it's the one that's going to save you, if it sacrifices and kind of brings in hope for salvation, well, serve it. But either way, let's not straddle two different gods. All this accomplishments, popularity, sex, if it has eternal saving power, well, serve it. Get as much as you can, sacrifice everything that you can, get rid of any distraction in your life and make it God. We often say, and I've said this plenty of times myself, that Jesus is my Lord, but then I struggle to live as if he is. I struggle to raise kids in a godly kind of manner, and honestly for me, this is my number one. In my family, if I think that nearly my only prayer for my kids is that they would grow up knowing that God is Lord, that they would love him and follow him and serve him. Everything else I think will come off the back of that. That is number one prayer. And sometimes I raise them, you know, that Broncos are Lord. Not this week, we're in mourning, right? But that's what we do. That winning is Lord. That success is Lord. Come on, just don't be a sook. Get up. Come on, be tough. That your image, that the way you present yourself is Lord. And I struggle. We raise them this way, but my priority, my heart, I want them to grab hold of that Jesus, above all things, is Lord. And so I say, Jesus, you're Lord, but then I get tight with my giving sometimes, and I battle with this. My wife is the best inflictor for me in this way, going, come on, let's just have some faith, Doug. I'm like, let's have some faith, Doug. But you get you know the feeling, but we say, oh, Jesus, you are Lord, and then we go away and try to make sure my Baal is still happy, going, I didn't really mean it. It's okay, just don't let him see you there. And I'm not going to give as generous as I feel the Spirit leading me towards. And I've struggled with tithing and I've struggled with this area. Jesus, you're Lord, but also not if it comes at the cost of my popularity, of my success, of the image that I carry. Jesus, you're Lord, but not at the cost of my other little Baals over here, or wherever the Holy Spirit is leading me, as long as it's not as long as I'm comfortable doing it. Otherwise I'll seek the opinion of another God, of whatever I think that I want to pursue more often. And ultimately I come back to this kind of statement, and maybe you've thought this in your own words as well, but it's this quote that I think that we live by, is if I had more, you can insert your idol, well then I would include God more. If I just had more money, I'd be more comfortable being generous. If I just had more kind of success, then once I get there, then I'll be able to do if I just had more confidence or more skill, if I just had, you can insert whatever it is for you, then I would just lean on what I'm limping on a little bit harder, right? And that is always the promise of a false god, of our idols. Just a little bit more and things will be okay. Just a little, I don't know if you've ever had a pay rise, but you're pretty eager for another one next year, aren't you? Because just a little bit more didn't really fulfill it. Just a little bit more never really saved. Just a little bit more popularity didn't, just 20 likes on Instagram wasn't enough. Now you've got a taste of the Kardashian lifestyle. I want 40.